fine. Let me know if I'm not speaking loud enough so you can't hear me. In general, please be comfortable. If you want to get up and stretch, that's fine. If you want to go for a walk, that's fine. Especially use the bathroom whenever you need to, and that way we might be able to avoid traffic jams when we take breaks and such. And welcome to the Yoga of Radiant Presence Retreat. So, normal human consensus reality worldview is grossly inaccurate, it turns out.
Sorry, Peter, couldn't get the last one. Grossly what?
Why don't you slide your chair about 6 feet forward?
Come on, Suzanne, move up.
So I'll try to speak up.
Okay, I actually just stay back here.
Okay.
Some stuff.
All right. So,
You said speak up if I could hear you.
absolutely. Human normal worldview is grossly inaccurate. In fact, it's pretty much 180 degrees backwards from the actual condition that attains here, the actual situation that this consists of. In a normal world, in a normal human worldview, we might suppose people think of the world is made of a bunch of individual components. The world is made of objects, there's things, there's the environment, there's weather systems, there's other life forms, there's social systems, there's all of these various components that are interacting in a very, very complex system. And one is oneself, one supposes, a component in that system, needs to interact with all these other components in the system in a way that is hopefully satisfactory. And that is pretty much held to be what is going on here in simple terms. This is, as I said, it's grossly inaccurate. The actual situation is almost the opposite of that. There is one thing that is here. There's one condition that is here. There's one wholeness that is here. There's one actuality that is a unified entity. And there are no separate components. There are no separate objects. There are no separate conditions that are actually interacting with each other. It's understandable how that misinterpretation can arise, because we're all very familiar with all of this, you know, all the way things seem to be, with all of these different shapes and objects moving around and physical sensations and so on and so forth. But this is an erroneous interpretation. So that's not a problem at all. There's nothing wrong with having an erroneous interpretation, except that the implications of this interpretation presents a lot of problematic implications, a lot of problematic notions that, oh my God, there's all of these, you know, one has to succeed in life, one has to survive, one has to, you know, navigate, one has to compete, one has to, all of these various things, and all of which requires a lot of effort and strategy and so on and so forth. And it's all a failure, because in the end you're going to die anyway. So it's not like it's a game you can win. So as a result, people walk around with a sort of a Weltschmerz. There's this universal worldview of, oh, you know, life basically sucks. And you do the best you can, and maybe you have some success and all of that, so very, very well and good. But by and large, it's a struggle. By and large, it's a lot of work. You know, you get to the end of the day, or you know, Miller time or whatever, and you just feel so good just to let go of all that and relax and collapse. But then, of course, the next day, you have to take it up again. The actuality is completely other than that. And in the actuality, there's absolutely no problems. In the actuality, there's no solutions, of course, since there's no problems. There is, in fact, no space and time. There is no conditions whatsoever that and objects do not interact with each other, and so on and so forth. And we'll go into this in some elaboration. So the fundamental spiritual problem is one of interpretation, is one of discovering that one's worldview has been a misinterpretation, and the only convincing way to discover that is to see directly what the actual condition is, which immediately disproves the erroneous misinterpretation. Well, I was noticing the big spire here. I think it probably improves our reception with the Space Brothers, you know. So maybe we can broadcast. So I have coined this phrase, radiant presence, to indicate what this actuality is that is here. We don't really have a good word for it in English. We have experience. Experience comes close, but experience is a little vague. Experience is sort of an overview classification or something. I don't know what. Experience doesn't seem to have the implication of a coherent actual entity. What is here is essentially a unified field of, we can call it transcendental energy, or you can call it consciousness if you want, if you have a very inclusive notion of that idea and so on. This wholeness alone exists. To you, it looks like the field of your experience. The field of your experience is the field of radiant presence. The field of your experience is the actuality that is here. Of course, we all know this intuitively. Little children know this. Little children know it's all about them. They're the center of the world. The world appears and dances around them. And, you know, so this is intuitively felt, and we're all familiar with this worldview from our own primitive recollections as infants. Although with our prolonged indoctrination into adulthood, we get all of these overlays of a sense of a self and a sense of involvement in life and so on and so forth. In the Hermetic tradition, which is lost, the origins of it are lost in history, it's thought to perhaps be a continuation of ancient Egyptian metaphysics or whatever, who knows. But it was continued into Arabic mysticism, particularly as alchemy, through the first millennium AD. And then these alchemical texts started to show up in Europe as translations mostly from Arabic, and a few originals in Greek and so on and so forth. And within this tradition, there was a wonderful direct allusion to this actuality, this transcendental field of actuality. In alchemy, they called it the prima materia, the first matter, i.e. the matter which all matter is made of, the matter which everything consists of, the stuff, the substance that everything consists of. And of course, they're very deliberately vague as to what this is. The tradition was quite deliberately esoteric. And I don't know, it's hard to know what the strategy was. Obviously, in the Middle Ages, it became important to avoid the Inquisition and so on. But at any rate, alchemical symbolism was deliberately ambiguous, deliberately very vague. And if you didn't know what it was talking about, you wouldn't be able to know what it was talking about, because it was a bizarre concatenation of all sorts of strange symbolism. So there's this notion of this prima materia, the first matter that the alchemists use as a starting point and the actual field of operation of all of the alchemical work. In Western magical traditions, there came to be a parallel notion of the astral light, which is held to be a field of subtle energy that's basically a continuum. It's something like the electromagnetic spectrum, but it's not limited to being a physical, a simply physical field, a physical continuum, but rather it's held to be a continuum of subtle energies that basically includes all aspects of reality. And these, of course, are basically the same idea. And both these ideas refer very nicely to what I call the radiant presence. Of course, there's no words for what this is. It is this. It is this actuality that is here. It's non-verbal. It's not a word. It has no labels. It has no, URL. But of course, it doesn't really need one because here it is. But since we are so semantically conditioned as human beings to think of things in terms of what we call them, in terms of what we think of them as being, and we have no language to refer to this actuality. We can talk endlessly about these supposed components. We can talk about rugs and rooms and people and chairs and lights and deserts and California and the global geopolitical situation and so on and so forth, all of these things. But all these things are supposedly relatively separate components rather than this continuum itself, this experiential continuum, which of course is the sole actuality that is available. It's the only thing you've ever experienced, right? Have you ever experienced anything other than the field of your experience? I mean, how could you? Where would you look for it? Where would you go? So the field of your experience is actual. And if you look, you'll notice it's the sole actuality. How can you find anything other than the field of your experience? Where would you look for it? You have to look in experience. And of course, what you find will be experience. It's unpredictable what it will look like. Experience is very slippery because it can look like anything. It can look like light, sound, texture of touch. It can look like thought. It can look like emotion. It can look like various, transcendental psychic vibes or who knows what. So there's all of these different guises, all these different seeming textures, experiential textures that can appear within or as the field of experience, but they never depart from experience. They're never anything more or less than experience. So I thought it would be amusing and also hopefully of some value to explore some very direct presentation of this astral life, of this prima materia. Hey man, it's never you two.
It's always full. And when you walk in, it started.
These are obviously fun suggested joy, but we'll be going over what these are about.
It's just a little weird.
No. What is the answer? Has a black hole. Does everyone have a sheet? All of the illustrations in these sheets of paper are taken from old alchemical documents. Alchemical symbols are very interesting. They're unlike most other kinds of symbology, because most symbology, like for example a language, is very abstracted, it's very indirect. The symbol itself has very little to do with what it refers to. So we have the word cat, which refers to the mammal that we're all familiar with, and the letter C-A-T and the word cat and the sound cat and what it looks like on paper has very little to do with the experience of the presence of a feline. Alchemical images are different. They actually refer to what they are. So they're about what they consist of. So there's a recursive, a continually recursive collapsing into themselves, which can be very potent and very profound. These alchemical images, alchemical symbols are also essentially schematics. They're schematic diagrams. They're like circuit diagrams very much. So you see, like an electronic circuit, if you look at, I don't know, most of you probably don't know much electronics, but if you look at the schematic of how a circuit is wired, it's very much a picture of the circuit, and it may not be a photorealistic depiction of the circuit, but it presents what the circuit actually consists of in a very direct fashion. Alchemical symbols are even more so, because alchemical symbols are depiction of experiencing. And of course, as the symbol is being experienced, the symbol is referring to the fact of its own experiencing. So it's extremely recursive and extremely, concrete. It's not abstracted to refer to something that's far removed from itself. Another aspect of alchemical symbols is that the symbols don't refer to separate things. In other words, a symbol may have a bunch of different components in it or sub-symbols, but those symbols don't refer to separate isolatable entities. They refer more to aspects of, an inclusive aspect of what it is. For example, let me think of a good example. If I drew, a seating diagram of this room, I could draw a circle where each of you are sitting approximately with your name on it, and I could say so this circle is you, this circle is you, this circle is you. And so these things are relatively isolatable and differentiable. The aspects of an alchemical symbol, on the other hand, indicate aspects of a continuum, so they aren't isolatable. It's rather like east and west. You can't find east. East is not an actual thing you can find. West isn't. You can't say go to east and phone me when you get to east. It doesn't happen, right? Because you go east and there you are, right here, and there's still more east there and more west here. So east and west are not actual entities. They're not separate conditions. They're aspects of a continuum. And this is the same with the elements. You'll notice all of these drawings have various different details to them, and these details all refer to very specific aspects of what the symbol refers to, but they aren't actually isolatable, where this portion of the symbol refers to exactly this, and that portion of the symbol refers to exactly that. And we'll see how that works as we look at some of these. So if you look at the first symbol, you'll see the familiar image of a snake eating its tail. The first thing to understand about this symbol, and about each of the symbols in this document, is this symbol is a picture of the totality of reality. It's not a picture of some little small thing. It's not a picture of a portion of something or a sub-aspect of something. The picture, the snake eating its tail, is a depiction of the totality of reality. So, what does this indicate? It indicates one essential aspect of this actuality, one essential aspect of the radiant presence, one essential aspect of your experience right here, right now, is that it is seeing itself. What is seeing your experience and what is being seen is one and the same. It's very much like in a dream. When you're dreaming the dreamer is experiencing the dream, but the dreamer is also dreaming the dream, and the dream consists of nothing other than the dreamer. So the dreamer is basically experiencing itself in an essentially closed loop, very much like the implications of this image of a snake eating its tail. So what else is in this symbol? A snake is a living entity. It's a life form. That's another potent aspect of this actuality. This is alive. This is not an inert, an inert, mechanical, dead phenomenon. This actuality that is here, this closed circuit of your experiential field, is vibrant, is alive. It's pulsating with intelligence. Serpents also symbolize energy. The way a serpent moves with an S-like undulation and so on is, reminiscent of sine waves that energy can be symbolized as traveling and so on and so forth. But at any rate, this notion of vitality, life, energy, and complete self-engagement, also self-containment. There's nothing outside this system. There's nothing, the snake needs nothing. It's eating itself. It's a complete closed loop. It's a complete self-sufficient, you could say self-generating, self-appreciating actuality. And just gazing at the symbol, irrationally, non-verbally, it conveys a juiciness, a poignancy that includes all these kinds of ideas and much more. It's important to remember each one of these symbols is referring to the totality of what you are right here, right now. They're depictions of this condition that you actually consist of. And they convey that in terms of as it is rather than as we're used to thinking of it. The second picture, of course, is a familiar eye in the triangle. This is supposed to be the monogram of the Illuminati or something, which conspiracy theorists hold to be 1%er elite bankers that meet, several times a year in secret locations to run the fate of the future. And that may be so, but that's not the actual Illuminati. The actual Illuminati are realized beings, are enlightened beings, which merely means someone who is aware of their actual condition, someone who experiences their condition as it actually is. So, and depicting it as an eye in a triangle is very poignant and profound and evocative. It is an eye, it's the all-seeing eye, because reality sees itself without impediment. Your experience is completely seen. Its appearance is it's being seen. Its very existence consists of its being seen. So seeing, or let's say being seen, is, depends, again, if you look at the snake, you can look at the head of the snake or the tail. Is it seeing or is it being seen? Well, it's one and the same. So this seeing, this absolute, intimate, naked unimpeded engagement is intrinsic in what this actuality is, what this field of subtle energy, this field of radiant presence consists of. It is a seeing. It sees itself. Right now, this is seen. Your reality is seen. How could it appear? How would there be anything if it wasn't being seen? To be seen is to exist. To be seen is to be actual. So this seeing, this being seen, is the actuality of perception, call it engagement, is intrinsic to what this is. Now remember, this is a picture of the totality of what you are. This one picture alone completely captures it from its point of view. It depicts the same thing as the snake eating its tail, but with a different argument, with a different bias, let's say. Now, the eye's in a triangle, so what's the triangle refer to? Again, we have the inherent polarity of this tends to show up as a subject-object polarity. It tends to show up as, all sorts of degrees of polarity of active and passive, being and non-being, conscious and unconscious, aware and unaware, in focus and not in focus. All of the aspects of the principles of division or multiplicity that all of the experiential textures seem to present as, right? If you look closely at the details of all of the experiential textures or qualities that present within your experience, you'll notice they're all amazingly differentiable from each other because of this range of qualitative difference, right? You look at light and there's lighter and darker. There's closer to the red spectrum or closer to the blue spectrum. There's, all of this range of differentiations, this range of essentially polarities that this textually shows up as. And then, of course, the third point is analogous to the body of the snake. If the first 2 points are analogous to the head and the tail of the snake, the third point is the body of the snake, which is the continuum of the integral dynamism of experience. Experience may be polarized into apparent subjectivity and objectivity, but it's always an absolute dynamic dance with itself. The dance of phenomena, the dance of the actual, what seems to be occurring within experience. And of course, those 3 points with this all-seeing eye and engagement of experience, of perception, is inclusive of what this is. Please try to keep noticing that these are all referring to this actuality that is here now, the actuality of your experience. The bottom image really just combines aspects of the first 2 images with the addition of a sun. And the sun emphasizes the essentially radiant aspect, the creative aspect of this actuality, that it continually and irrepressibly expresses. It shows up as qualities. It shows up with an absolute dynamism, with an absolute positivity. You don't need to go and get your experience. It comes to you, right? It's very positive. It's very radiant. On both sides, both the perceiving is positive, perceiving, dynamically and very actively, voraciously, lustfully engages spontaneously in all the experiential conditions and textures it present. And likewise, all the qualities that are being presented are dynamically jumping forth into experience. But you don't need to go out and try and pull out color or pull out sound. They on the contrary, they shine forth unstoppably right into your experience. On the next page, at the top of the page, we have a very familiar symbol, the caduceus. This is a symbol that was attributed to the god Hermes or Mercury, in Greek and Roman mythology. Hermes, it's interesting to notice that this alchemical and magical tradition is called Hermetic. It's called the Hermetic tradition because the god Hermes, or the principal Hermes, essentially psychic functionality and the nature of psychic functionality is the very essence of what this is and what this tradition is about. In particular, spirituality is actually a psychic technology of reorienting to the actuality of one's energy field. So this is, it's a literal reorientation. It's not conceptual. We can't say what it is because, of course, we don't have a modern explanation or description of psychic functioning. But nonetheless, the actuality of this yoga is a psychic reorientation. And by psychic, again, I don't mean just mental, but in the Hermetic sense of all of one's subtle energy field to the actuality of its true configuration, which is actually depicted in this symbol, not surprisingly. So at the top, there's a circle with wings. Now the circle is essentially the same image as the snake, the circle that the snake forms. So it's a closed continuum, self-engaged, absolutely complete, absolutely independent, a closed universe, if you like, a closed infinity. And it's depicted as winged to show its absolute independence, its absolute freedom, its absolute lack of limitation, lack of limitation is a good way to put it. Now, we have the central column descending from the circle, entwined by two snakes. The central column indicates the range of call it the having a senior moment. The range of the spectrum of all possible energy conditions. Like the electromagnetic spectrum, for example, in physics, is a very limited aspect of the same thing. So if you take all possible energy conditions, material conditions, conditions of quantum phenomena, conditions of electromagnetism, conditions of color, which is aspect of wavelengths of light, conditions of all different sensory textures or qualities. Again, these are all aspects of, and literally consist of nothing other than frequencies in this continuum of energy, apparent energy spectrum. So this closed circle is the totality that shows up as all of this incredible readout of an apparently extended or differentiated energy spectrum, which we of course experience as all the experiential qualities, all the light, color, and texture, and sound, and thought, and so on and so forth. As a column, a vertical column, it has an above and a below. It has an up and a down. The top part is connected to this circle. The bottom part is just extended downwards. And this refers to the aspect of this, of relative degrees of apparent density that these subtle energy vibrations, call them, consist of. So at the lower end, one has more apparently dense qualities of experience, perhaps, things that seem to be more physical, more coherent, more stable. And as one ascends the spectrum, moving up the column, one moves into, frequencies of light, frequencies of thought, perhaps frequencies of, psychic vibrations that are beyond, what we would ordinarily classify as thought, and so on and so forth. And there's no point in trying to classify all these things. They're unimportant. The point is they are a continuum. They are aspects of one thing. They are a single continuum of energy whose very nature is to appear in all of these different apparent densities. And this is what the column indicates. The serpents that are entwined about it, again, indicate its vital nature. It's alive. Serpents are symbols of intelligence. Serpents are symbols of functionality and structure. And serpents are symbols of energy. So this reiterates, and that they are twined about the column suggests the vibratory nature of this column of energy. Of course, you're very familiar with this symbolism in the chakra system from yoga, and various other, systems of symbology and so on. So this picture is a picture of the totality of reality, the totality of your experiential field. This absolutely transcendental, self-contained actuality that exists in absolute freedom, independent. It needs to rest on nothing. It's not sitting on anything. There's nothing doing it. It is doing itself. So that's doing its sphere, and it shows up as this continuum of energy qualities, which we experience as the different aspects or flavors of our experiential events. The second picture on this page, the cross of the four elements, is probably quite familiar to people that have looked into esotericism at all. And basically this reiterates the caduceus. Earth, the vertical column between earth and air is analogous to the vertical column of the caduceus. And earth is not a particular thing. You can't go and find earth any more than you can go and find air. Their relative degrees are like north and south, they're like east and west. You can't get to east, you can't get to west. But relative to anywhere, there is a degree of eastness and a degree of westness. So relative to anywhere within this energy spectrum, there's a degree of earth moving towards earth, which is moving towards more what we might experience as concrete, coherent, more objectified, more stable. And then on the direction of air, one moves into aspects that are less coherent, less stable, more dynamic, less centralized, these kinds of notions. So you might think of this in terms of a hierarchy of density. So like, for example, dreams are more aerial than waking experience. And deep sleep is perhaps more aerial still. It's very amorphous. It doesn't show up as anything very coherent at all. Whereas waking experience perhaps shows up perhaps with a greater degree of earthiness. But you'll notice that all experience always has all of these. Even experience that shows up as very coherent has aspects of it of absolute incoherence about them if you look closely. So these conditions do not exist as actual findable stable conditions. They're simply aspects of emphasis, you might say. And fire and water on the sides indicate the essential polarity of subject and object, active and passive, so on and so forth, in focus and out of focus. So remember, each of these pictures is a picture that, is let's call it a spin-doctored view of this actuality, the actuality of the prima materia, of the actuality of your experiential field, of the actuality of the astral light, of the actuality of radiant presence, which is the substance and event and entity that is actually present here. And that all apparent sub-events and entities and interactions and circumstances actually consist of. In the same way that whatever seems to be appearing in your dream last night is actually nothing other than dream. There was one event happened in your dream last night, dreaming. And yet it can look like this and that, and seeing someone and trying to do something, all these apparent sub-events, but they weren't actually there. It seemed as if it was that way. It's interpretable as if it was that, but it was never anything other than dreaming. Never became anything more than dreaming. It was never anything less than dreaming, and never departed from being just that exactly. And so likewise, this field of radiant presence that is here now shows up as sitting in this room, having this talk, having these pieces of paper, feeling the chair under your butt, so on and so forth. Whatever experiential subcategories you could analyze your experiences presenting as is just a categorization of something that is intrinsically this field of your experience. Are you all enjoying this? Is this too much for anyone?
It's great.
Cool.
A lot here.
Huh?
There's a lot here.
Well, there's a lot. Looking at yoga of radiant presence is difficult in one sense because you're looking at everything. And it's very easy in one sense because you're looking at one thing. And, the most challenging aspect of it is it is so alien to our normal human way of thinking. Because we're so used to thinking of all these separate entities and separate qualifications that we can talk about, and we think we know what they are, and we think they're stable and independent from each other and so on. And this perspective is radically and fundamentally different than that. The third page is verbal, but it's very archaic. I'll read through it once quickly, and then I'll go back through it. I'll explain to you what it says. It's basically, this whole page is basically saying the same thing as any one of the symbols we looked at previously. And every subparagraph of it is also a whole, which is saying the same thing as any one of the symbols we looked at previously. So it's a very holographic kind of a hierarchy presentation. So don't worry about it. I'll just read through it. Don't worry about it if it doesn't make much sense. It's very archaic and very symbolic. True, without error, self-verifyingly certain. That which is above is as that which is below, and that which is below is as that which is above, to perpetrate the miracles of the one thing. As all things are from one, by the meditation of this one, so from this one thing come all things by adaptation. Its father is the sun, its mother is the moon, the wind carries it in its belly, the nurse thereof is the earth. It is the father of all perfection and the consummation of the whole world. Its power is integral if it be turned to earth. Thou shalt separate the earth from the fire, the subtle from the coarse, gently and with much ingenuity. It ascends from earth to heaven and descends again to earth, and receives the power of the superior and the inferior. Thus thou hast the glory of the whole world, let all obscurity flee before thee. This is the strong power of all powers, including every subtle and penetrating every. Thus the world, hence all wonderful adaptations, of which this is the manner. My course grade, having the three parts of the philosophy of the whole world. That is finished, which I have to say concerning the operation of the sun. Very evocative, not very modern, eh? So, without error, self-verifying. This indicates the entire path of this yoga that are being indicated here, which is analogous to the triangle, the eye and the triangle, analogous to the head and the tail of the serpent and the body of the serpent, so on and so forth. Is the way things appear very cursorily. We're in a room. That's true. Okay. But what's without error? What does it mean to be within a room? What is a room? What is within? What is it an experience? Is it matter? Is consciousness involved? What's really going on here? Without error, that's being with the sense more precisely, more carefully. And self-verifying means being with the line of what it can be found to consist of without any extra assertion, without any supposition, without any imagination. So this basically indicates the whole path of yoga. You start in the beginning, you think you know where you are, and you think you know what's going on. Here we are, I'm Peter Brown, and I live in the world, and I'm 63 years old, and we're in California, and blah, 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 blah. All that's true. Okay, good. So that's the first step. Then, without error, well, what's really going on? What do any of those things actually consist of? And in looking into this, one inevitably is drawn to discovering experience. Well, wow, what's going on here is experience. What is that? And this leaves us at what is self-verifyingly certain, which is the presence of the experiential field. So that one sentence is the whole shebang. That one sentence is the snake eating its tail. That one sentence is the caduceus. Each one of these images holographically indicates the whole. So, the second paragraph. That which is above is as that which is below, and that which is below is as that which is above, to perpetrate the miracles of the one thing. So, this calls in mind the vertical column in the caduceus, where you have degrees of density, degrees of apparent density of the radiance, of the energetic vibratory phenomena that show up as experiential phenomena. So if you look at any aspect, any level of density of experience, you essentially find the same condition. It seems very different, sort of a material experience seems to have a certain density and quality which is radically different than the quality of thought, radically different than the quality of deep sleep. But if you look very closely, you will discover they're in fact the same, made of the same substance, functioning in the same way. So that which is above is as that which is below, and that which is below is as that which is above. So any degree of density you go to, you find the same thing going on in the same way. To perpetrate the miracles of the one thing. It's one thing. The radiance, the primal materia, the astral light, whatever you want to call it. There's one energetic actuality that is the substance of reality itself. That is this. It's right here, right now. Right. This is it. It's not particularly esoteric. It's completely obvious. And they call it miracles to indicate that the way this works is completely wildly irrational, illogical, unexplainable. How can this be? How can this exist? How can this be here? How can this be the way it is with this inconceivable complexity and subtlety, this inconceivable actuality? How can that happen? It's a miracle. Very simple. As all things are from one by the meditation of this one, so from this one come all things by adaptation. So this one field of radiance, all things are from it, right? This room is from the radiance as an abstraction, right? This body, the experience of this body is from the radiance, and so on and so forth. Anything that can appear is abstracted from the actuality of experience itself, of radiance, of the radiant presence. By the meditation of this one. There's some dispute whether that word should be meditation or mediation, but it amounts to the same thing, so it's irrelevant. I went with meditation arbitrarily because it's more problematic. So it makes it more fun to talk about. But so things arise from the one by its own meditation. It looks at itself and basically free associates or hallucinates all of these conditions. very much like we do at night when we dream. When we dream, the sleeping consciousness is looking at itself, nothing in particular, and yet gradually or suddenly or however, it seems to sort of precipitate into, somewhat specific forms and somewhat specific situations and all of this that just sort of seem to be there, self-actualizing and relative to each other and seems to form a whole, but however it shows up, right? So simply by the sleeping consciousness looking at itself, all of that arises. So from this one thing come all things by adaptation. From the continuum of radiance, from the continuum of that vertical column of all possible densities of subtle energy, vibration, all things appear. Its father is the sun, its mother is the moon, the wind carries it in its belly, the nurse thereof is the earth. The father is the sun, it comes from its own radiance, it comes from the eye seeing, it comes from the initial positivity of its very nature. Its mother is the moon. It tends to objectify itself, it tends to see itself as object. In the movie theater analogy, there seems to be a screen that the light can shine upon. The light shines, that's the sun as its father, but the light seems to shine on a screen. So when you dream, the dreaming consciousness shines forth, not just passively, as we might imagine, but creatively. And it seems to objectify itself. There seems to be a screen, there seems to be an otherness, there seems to be a world or whatever that virtually seems to show up. Or if you do if you ever try deep meditation or prolonged meditation, you'll discover the same phenomena. It's very much like dreaming, where there'll be essentially nothing going on, a very subtle, amorphous, presence, whatever, and it will seem to coalesce into various degrees of coherence that will sort of may drift in and out, and so on. But however it is for you. But anyway, this aspect is. Very familiar. The wind carries in its belly, the nurse thereof is the earth. So the wind, the air, is all the possibility of all these vibrations. It's like the flickers of light like in a snowstorm. All this amazing incoherent flashes of light that are not particularly resolved in anything. But that becomes the basis for free associating coherence. Like if you look at your field of vision closely, you'll notice it's very pixelated. It's actually, countless, tiny, minuscule flickerings. If you close your eyes and look at the field of your closed eyes, you'll notice this very, very quickly. You'll see a virtual continuum of countless instantaneous flickering presences of light, like fireflies or stars or something, who knows what. And actually, when your eyes are open, you're seeing the same thing. If you look closely at what you're perceiving, it's very easy to see this if you're looking at something relatively undifferentiated like the sky. If you look into a clear sky, you'll notice right away all this flickering. That is usually attributed to, a random action in the what you call the nerves in the eye and so on. But that's just a materialistic explanation of it. The experiential phenomena is of a field of dynamism, a field of basically amorphous dynamism, which is the air that is its gestation, its potential. And the nurse is the earth. So then out of this comes degrees of apparent coherence, degrees of apparent form, degrees of entities and objects and so on that we're all very familiar with. And again, this is a continuum, like we talked about when in the image of the four elements. It's a continuum of apparent density and apparent coherence with objects and then these flickers. And if you look closely at objects, you'll see lots of flickers. If you look at the flickers, you'll tend to see objects. So it's it's not a simple either or, it's one thing or another. It's always a continuum, it's always a spectrum. What are we doing? I'm just going too slow.
Don't listen to me.
Yeah? Is that something? No.
I'm just
Okay.
looking at my hand.
Yeah, that's a good idea. It is the Father of all perfection and the consummation of the whole world. So this field of radiant presence, this field of actuality, is complete. It is whole. It is perfect. The whole world is complete in its inclusion as this unified field of actuality, this unified field of radiant presence that your experience consists of, that your being consists of. Its power is integral if it be turned to earth. In other words, dealing with it as form, as circumstance, is learning to deal with it effectively. It's, in spirit, this indicates an aspect in spirituality and problems. It's very easy to get kind of escapist. The spirituality is out there. In the amorphousness is this wonderful wholeness and this wonderful completeness and the light of God and angels and continuums and the purity of consciousness and all that. But then you come here and you have to pay bills and, someone's cutting you off in traffic and you want to give them the finger and all this stuff. That's it too. That's nothing other than the radiance too. The radiance can look like that and is doing that. Now, the next paragraph that's underlined, this indicates the actual practice of the yoga. The yoga of radiant presence is very precisely indicated in this paragraph. Thou shalt separate the earth from the fire, the subtle from the coarse, gently and with much ingenuity. What this means is, look at your actual experience. And it doesn't matter where, look at anywhere within your experience. And it was, and this goes back to the very first sentence we saw, true without error, self-error, finally certain. So you look at any portion of your experience and right away there'll be a first take on what it seems to be, the way it seems to be. Whatever it is, doesn't matter. If you look closer, you will discover more subtlety, you will discover more dimension, you will discover less coherence, and it will kind of open and open continually. So you're separating earth from fire. So the earth is your first take. The earth is the superficial aspect of what an experience seems to be, the sort of the superficial aspect of its form. And as you are with this closely, experientially, your consciousness will spontaneously go to more subtle aspects, to sort of dynamism, to sort of, you might say, a more subtle energetic presentation that the experience actually consists of. So the earth and the fire, the subtle from the coarse. So this, obviously the coarse is the earth and the subtle is the fire, the more essential, dynamic, energetic aspect that experience actually consists of. And by looking at any particular experience, you will discover this. You will discover both your first interface with it as something, and then if you continue to notice it, you will discover more and more subtlety, more and more nuance, more and more openness and dimension. Gently and with much ingenuity. Obviously, you don't do this mechanically or dully. This is an engagement of subtlety, of sensitivity and intelligence, of subtle participation. It ascends from earth to heaven and descends again to earth. So you will notice your experience moves from more formal aspects into more and more subtle aspects. But the formal aspects haven't gone anywhere, and so your attention will come back to this. And this is very typical. And again, we notice this all the time. Spiritual seekers are continually complaining, I looked and I have all this wonderful openness, but then it all collapsed and I lost it all. This is the very nature of the dynamism of the radiance. It is totally unstable. It does not stay anywhere. It moves from one condition to another. It continually breathes. It continually drifts away from itself, from what it has been. And as it drifts away, whatever it drifts to, well, it'll drift away from that as well, continually, endlessly dynamism and endlessly flowing. So it ascends from earth to heaven and descends again to earth. The symbolism of, relatively coarse, coherent modes of experiencing and relatively subtle, incoherent, more multidimensional modes of experiencing. And it receives the power of the superior and inferior. Again, this echoes that which is above is that which is below. So the nature of what it is that is more subtle, that is less coherent, and the nature of what it is that is more coherent are both values, they're both powers, they're both potencies, they're both assets. They're both meaningful and profound ways that the radiance manifests, that the radiance functions as. They're modes of your expression, they're modes of your manifestation, of your self-engagement. So it ascends from earth to heaven and descends again to earth and receives the power of the superior and inferior. So this is the yoga of radiant presence. This is the whole course of it. Simply being with your experience and letting it move into itself and letting it move back. And just it moves around endlessly through itself, exploring itself. And if you do this with subtlety, with intelligent engagement, it cumulatively refines its understanding of itself. It's spiritual ignorance is a lot like childishness. When we're settling for very simplistic explanations. We're settling for very, there's a Santa Claus and God's in heaven and all's right with the world. But then when the experience looks at itself, it discovers, wait a minute, there's other things going on here. It's very subtle, it's very weird, it's very interesting. And it reveals itself to itself simply by being with itself. Nothing else can reveal itself because it is subtler than everything, than anything. It can't be described, it can't be put. It can't be, you can't write a paragraph and say specifically exactly how what this really is, and you read it and you go, oh, okay, now I know. It's not like that. One has to develop a sensitivity, one has to develop subtlety to be able to be with it as it is. And it's actually easier than that because you don't need to, there's a shortcut in the lazy man's approach. You don't actually have to develop subtlety because you already have subtlety. It's more of recognizing the subtlety that you intrinsically consist of. Because the radiance is already the radiance. The radiance is already absolute transcendental intelligence. And the apparent dullness that ignorance consists of is just a mode of it being with itself that exists in the context of its intrinsic subtlety, its intrinsic hyperintelligence. So, that's why I like this word noticing, because you're not leaning to do anything that you aren't already doing. You're rather noticing what experience actually already consists of. So it's completely effortless. Thus thou hast the glory of the whole world, therefore let all obscurity flee before thee. I think that's pretty self-explanatory. This is the whole shooting match. This is what's going on here. This is the absolute epitome of human achievement. Self-realization, realization of reality, realization of actuality, the discovery of the actuality of the serpent eating its tail is the glory of the whole world. It's as good as it gets. That's the treasure. That's the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. Pot of gold at the end of the rainbow is a nice image. There's a caduceus again. The rainbow is the serpents twined about the column of different degrees of density, the subtle energy. And the pot of gold is the sphere, the winged sphere at the top. So this is the strong power of all powers, including every subtle and penetrating every solid thing. Thus the world is created, hence are all wonderful adaptations of which this is the manner. We've already covered that. That's the verbal portion of Roxanne.
You missed the last paragraph.
Yes.
I had a question about, because it says having the three parts of the philosophy of the world. And I'm not quite clear when.
The tendency of it to be polarized as a triplicity. The line, the triangle, the head and the tail and the body of the snake, all of these aspects are indicate the same thing. It's not a specific, it's not that there's three parts and the first part is this and the second part is this and the third part is this. Alchemical symbols aren't separable into coherent wholes, they're more polarities.
Well, before we leave this page, I have, I'm stumbling on the word adaptation. And what I'd like to know is what that word could refer to, say, in terms of some of your other teachings.
Adaptation is the principle of something functioning relative to something else.
A what?
Something functioning relative to something else. Like if you adopt to something, then there's it and there's you, and there's a mutual accommodation. Okay? And the coalescence of any object is always, there's an it, and then there's its context, and then there's a mutual correspondence between those two. A point of focus and a context for the point of focus, or a point of focus and a field within which that point of focus is, located or appears. And so this indicates, in a vague way, this way that any phenomenon, apparent entity that appears is not actually extricated from its milieu, but is an adaptation with respect to it.
Peter?
Yes.
Along the same lines, so is it our adaptation to how we're experiencing reality that keeps us from noticing the subtler aspects?
Exactly so. Sure.
Okay.
Same thing. Okay, the last page is fun. Again, each of the 5 images is a depiction of the totality. Each of these images is a picture of realization. The first one is a little more abstract. The other 4 are very direct pictorial depictions. So in the first one, around the circle, it says Visita Interior. Let me see, I can't really read. Visita Interior Terram Rectificando Ingenious Occultum Rapidum. That basically translates as visit the interior of the earth and by rectification discover or have revealed the hidden stone. And this, of course, is an arcane alchemical hint. And this refers exactly to what we were talking about with the yoga of radiant presence, with the practice of noticing. Visiting the interior of the earth means the earth is any form, relatively coherent form, that shows up as an experience. Visit the interior of it, which means be with that experience more subtly, more intimately, more profoundly. It will open up into a range of subtle energy, actuality, that it actually consists of. So that's visiting the interior. By rectification, now this is a very interesting word. Rectification can indicate a purification, but more specifically, it indicates correcting. Mm-hmm. And this indicates very nakedly the nature of the spiritual problem is an error. It's an error of interpretation. It's just a big cock-up. An ignorant worldview upon which all frustration and suffering is based is basically a big mistake. It's a misinterpretation of phenomena. It's a misinterpretation of the actuality of experience. So this is very simple. By visit the interior of the earth, I be with the actual concrete phenomena of your experience more and more subtly, develop subtlety to see what it actually is and the way that it actually is that. And this will correct your misunderstanding, which is the problem, which is the impurity that gets purified. And this will reveal the hidden stone. The alchemists symbolize the stone of the philosophers, this stone as the nature of this perfection, this diamond, this infinite field of radiant presence that actually exists. You know, I mean, you look at, when you understand that the Philosopher's Stone is that, all of alchemy makes perfect sense. You know, the Philosopher's Stone will turn lead into gold. What does that mean? It turns ignorance into intelligence, into clarity, into realization. Lead symbolizes coarseness, stupidity, being addicted to coarse form, to oversimplified interpretations. And gold is ductile. Gold is inviolable. Gold cannot be tarnished. Gold is entirely transcendental in terms of being vulnerable in any way. Gold was held to be a pure metal. And so the Philosopher's Stone, i.e. realization of this nature, turns lead into gold, takes misinterpretation of ignorance and transforms it into gold, which the Philosopher's Stone consists of, radiant presence, the discovery of radiant presence. I can go into the details of the picture, but it's probably not too important at this point. We can do it some other time if you're interested.
Yes.
If you look down at the picture below it to the right, you see a rectangle. There's a sun and the moon at the top. That's analogous to subjectivity and objectivity, fire and water, so on and so forth. There's a bird in its own circle. So again, this is analogous to the winged globe at the top of the caduceus. It's a circle of completeness that is essentially not resting on anything, independent, completely free, completely transcendental. Below it is another circle with the snake eating its tail. So in a way, this indicates also the above and the below, the aspect of the radiance appearing as more subtle and less subtle. So even the less subtle, the more terrestrial, the more formal aspects of the apparition are revealed to be, in fact, this absolutely transcendental, self-absorbed, self-engaged condition of radiant presence.
I think it's a dragon eating its tail.
Dragon, serpent. Dragon is just a serpent with wings. That just adds to the symbolism of independence
This one has
and power.
arms and ears.
Yeah. It's a very functional dragon. You can drive a car, get a job.
Dragons usually do have claws.
Oh, maybe, I don't know, I've never seen one.
I see them all the time.
And then we have the two candlesticks, which again indicates the dynamic aspect of this. The fact that a candlestick has the light at the top indicates again the process of the yoga, where by moving from the coarse to the fine, one discovers the radiance, one discovers the light it consists of. With vines growing, twining up this, it indicates the vitality, the aliveness, the essential living nature of this actuality. And then this twined around back and forth indicates the energy of it. You know, it's just similar to the snakes twined around the caduceus. It shows that this is all an energetic phenomenon. It's a vibratory, dynamic, energetic phenomenon. And the two of them is a duality, which echoes the sun and the moon, that this always shows up as apparently diversified from itself, as apparently other. This unity that is this actuality never shows up as a unity. It always shows up as an infinitely differentiated continuum, which is very weird. And of course, as humans, we're very familiar with being completely disoriented by this. I mean, all this data, all this stuff seemingly going on, you know, it's bewildering, right? And the fact that it is one thing that is showing up like that, very much like a dream is one thing that shows up as all the wacky stuff that can seem to be going on, is confusing until you see the actual nature of it, when you see that it is one thing that shows up this way.
The stars.
And the stars, the seven stars in alchemy indicate the seven qualities that are qualified in the Hermetic tradition under the symbols of the seven planets, or the seven metals in the alchemy, which basically is another indication of the range of vibratory phenomena that shows from coarse to subtle. You know, and the alchemists viewed that as basically an ascension, where lead was at the bottom, indicating the most coarse, dense level of vibration, the most coherent, the most formed, the most slow-moving, very much the way, you know, we think of matter as being. But of course, matter is actually this amazing vibratory quantum phenomena, which is what one discovers when one looks closer. And of course, experientially, matter is an amazing subtle vibratory phenomena. So you don't even need to be a quantum physicist to discover this. You discover it directly, experientially, by simply looking at what you are experiencing. So the image to the left is a very simple one. Again, it shows a bird and an ovoid. So this indicates that this is not based on anything, not resting on anything. It's self-originating and self-supporting. It is a bird. It's wearing a crown. So this shows its sovereignty. The fact that it is the Lord. It is its own Lord. It is its own monarch. This radiant presence is subject to nothing. It is the Lord of everything. It does everything. This that you are is doing all of this effortlessly and spontaneously and intrinsically. That's some serious power. And we have a sun and a moon too, and this reiterates all the dualities of subject and object, and so on and so forth. You have a globe of a terrestrial globe in one foot, I guess, which shows that this includes all of manifestation, all aspects of however things appear is this. And then you have a staff in the other hand, which again indicates the continuum of the absolute complete spectrum of the vibratory phenomena of subtle energy that everything consists of. The picture right below that, you have a man standing on a sun, a woman standing on the moon. They're both wearing crowns. A bird overhead with a star above that. This is probably, by now, this is probably pretty self-explanatory. The moon is a subject and object, the active and passive aspects of this field. The bird indicates its transcendental nature that is always participatory. The crossed plants, the plants indicate again the livingness, that this is a living condition. This is a pure life force, this actuality. And the bird indicates that the transcendental aspect is always present, even in any subject object, any experience. Anytime you are experiencing a phenomenon, like say you're sitting here looking at this room, wondering what's going on or whatever, that's going on. That's the man and the woman looking at each other. But the bird is also here. Because, and this is what is discovered through the yoga, you look at any experience intimately, and you discover all of this amazing more and other that is actually present in the actual experience itself concretely. And the star overhead above the bird indicates that, again, the perfect transcendental nature of this condition. The one at the bottom that's a little more complicated. My feeling is, why don't we skip it and maybe we'll play with it some other day if you feel like being amused by it. I think we spent enough time with this.
I think that's funny, don't you?
So, hopefully in all of this roundabout, some idea, some sense of this, the nature of this is being communicated. This actuality here of your experiential field, your experience is right here, right now. It's actual, it's real. It's the soul actuality. There's nothing else whatsoever you can possibly find. You are the sole inhabitant of your universe. You are the sole inhabitant of the field of your experience. And it's happening right here, right now, always, just like usual, like same old, same old. It looks like whatever it looks like. Now it looks like, maybe being in this room and this talk and thinking whatever you're thinking and remembering whatever you're remembering and being annoyed at whatever you're annoyed at and so on. It's all this amazing cascade, this movie, this continually dynamic presentation of all these qualities, right? That never resolves anything, they never stabilize, they're just instantly wafting through and then something else wafting through. But the field never comes and goes, right? The radiance never comes and goes. What it looks like is continually changing. Like when you dream at night, the dreaming doesn't come and go. The dreaming is just this. But it looks like this and that, and someone's coming and some condition's coming, and you have to go do something, and you're running away from something. That's what, right? Doesn't matter. And human normal consensus reality view has it all asked backwards. We think what's important is what's coming and going. We think what's important is this entity or that entity, this condition or that condition, and completely ignore the field, the actuality of the continuum of the field of experience, which never comes and goes. It's always you, here, now, right? That's what it is right now, right? It's always that, never been anything else. It's always you, here, now. Always looks different, but instant looks different. So whatever it looks like now is already gone forever, right? And you go to sleep, it's still you, here, now. Something like that. You start dreaming, it's you, here, now. Something like that. So the radiance doesn't change. Just all of these different vibrations, like in the vertical column, I mean, this is in the chakra systems. You're all familiar with the maps of the chakras and all that. This vertical column of the subtle energy spectrum is literally what this is made of. What the reality of the universe, what the reality of your being consists of, is this field of call it subtle energy vibration. I mean, you can't, what does that mean? What's subtle energy mean? What's vibration mean? You can't analyze it, but that's not the point. The point is that you don't need to analyze it, but you can know it very intimately. And what it shows up as is this astounding range of experiential conditions and textures that present themselves as everything you have ever and will ever experience. All these qualities, all of this, all these experiential characteristics of all this amazing range of density, the fineness of these subtle psychic vibrations or whatever, right? And thought and emotion and physical sensation, and it's all of these textures that just continually present themselves. And this vertical column, it doesn't just symbolize it, it actually is experienceable as this. You can experience the continuity, the continuum of the field of your own energy presence. It's not that it's literally vertical and it's literally arranged in an upright line, and yet in a strange way it is. In a strange way it's palpable. If any of you have ever done any kind of physical yoga or meditation, you'll notice if you sit upright, there's a different kind of alignment can come in. If you sort of flunk like this, it's not better or worse, but it's different. It's palpably different in its energy character, in its well, you can't say in what, but it nonetheless it's experientiably actual and different. And the point is to play with this stuff, to be with this in all its modes, and let yourself discover what it is. And this is the yoga. The yoga is very, very simple. Simply being with experience and let it show you what it is. But the trick to this is to do it, as the Emerald Tablet says, suavely and with much ingenuity. In other words, do it with intelligence, do it with sensitivity. Be with your experience, in a spirit of questioning, in a spirit of intelligent investigation, not analysis, but like the way you would explore a fine wine you've never tasted or something like that. Or, someone says, this is amazing, just taste this. And it gives you a taste of some dish. Well, how would you approach that? You approach it with subtlety. You approach it with, it's okay. You can do that, but you don't have to. You can really be with what's there and see how finely you can do it. And there's no limit to how finely this can be done because, again, it's an infinite spectrum of subtlety. And it already is that. It's not like you need to develop subtlety. The subtlety is already there. You just need to let yourself access it, notice it. Because the full range of the spectrum is already intrinsically present. Realization is already present. This is, and never has been, anything other than reality, nakedly revealing itself. And realization is simply noticing that fact. You don't need to do anything, you don't need to achieve anything or change anything. So it's really kind of, you could say, sensitivity training. It's a matter of letting yourself, let it show you what it is by being sensitive to it, to being with it as it is. So it's like learning to listen to good music or learning to enjoy anything. How do you do that? You do it by, subtlety and intelligence and intimacy of experience, of engagement, of feeling. It's not an abstraction. It's not a process of thought or analysis. On the contrary, it's a process of absolute intimate textual engagement. And this is the yoga of very new presence. This is how it works. And of course, this is not really any news. All human experience has never been anything other than this. Become a subtle person or be a clod, How do you become a subtle person? Well, develop subtlety. Yeah.
When things seem to be kind of grungy and flat, just rough,
Sure.
coarse,
Mm-hmm.
it feels like the quality of noticing is coarse in and of itself.
Absolutely. Sure.
So how can it be subtle?
Because whatever is present, there's always a degree of greater subtlety simultaneously present. Always. Even if it's just a slight veneer. So say things are coarse and heavy and stupid and dull. If you look at that coarseness, heaviness, and stupidness and dullness, in a coarse and heavy and stupid and dull manner, as you will at that time, of course, there'll be something else. There's always something. It's always a little bit more another. Always. The experience is never actually limited. No matter how coherently it seems to be a certain way, it's never actually limited totally and completely to being that way. So even if it seems to be dominantly that way, it's also a little bit not that way. So there's always room for noticing. And it's not important anyway. When you're being coarse and stupid and dull, notice coarse and stupidness and dullness, because that's a mode too. That's a mode of the radiance. We're all familiar with that. Where does that come from? What's doing that? It's easy to get into a kind of a snobbery of refinement in spirituality, but where the finer and subtler is better. Well, it kind of is. It's kind of hard to argue against that very much. But in actual fact, all the modes of experiential energy, you call it, of experiential phenomena, are intrinsically astoundingly subtle. I mean, how can coarseness, how can stupidity happen? It's mind-boggling. Coarseness and stupidity are very subtle phenomena.
Is there something also, Peter, with a lot of these symbols seems to be repeated over and over again? Maybe this is something I'm reading into it, but about the verticality of it. They never show the continuum in a horizontal, because that seems to evoke something temporal, or I don't know, it feels like time or something.
No, it's interesting. Yeah, it's very interesting, this symbolism, because it's not just arbitrary. It's not just a convention of symbolism. There is something about verticality.
Yes.
And I think it's related to our physical existence and the way we experience gravity. Because, in the terrestrial environment, obviously, gravity is that way, and density tends to go towards gravity. So, you have Earth, and then, ancient categorization, Earth, and then water is on the Earth, and the air is above the water, and then the space with the fire of the stars is above that. And fire moves upwards, so fire is intrinsically moving away from Earth, so fire is an opposite of Earth. Water moves downwards. We look at water, we're just talking physically here. Whether a spring comes up on a mountain, what does it do? It moves it down as much as it can. As far down as it can go. And when it hits the ocean, that's as far as it can go. Unless it can go farther, and it will. So water goes down, fire goes up. So we have an inherent, symbolism of the very structure of our physical and apparent environment and perception. So this may be echoes of that, but who knows? You can't you can't pin down what any of this is or how it works. But you're right, it's quite palpable that there is this,
There's an instantaneity or something in the vertical.
very much so. And you get it, you feel it when you're like that.
Yeah.
You're just like that.
Like when you say this, you don't go this.
Yeah.
You go this.
Yeah, yeah, because this is more integrative, this is more divisive.
Yes.
This indicates the spread of phenomena, this indicates their collapse into the unity.
Yeah.
Also, this, like in our sense of time, and again, this may be arbitrary symbolism,
Right.
but the present seems like this,
Right.
whereas the past and the future seems more like that. You know, so the past and the future like this and the present like this, it doesn't resonate the same way. And so what's up with that? I mean, you can't pin it down,
No.
but of course you can't pin anything down, so.
just
But it's
When
curious.
you think how we're energetically oriented
Yeah,
with the spine.
sure, the subtle energies, our subtle energy orientation seems to have a verticality to it. If you look at the symmetry, the bilateral symmetry of the body, with basically we're very much the same side to side, but we're very differentiated vertically and so on.
Yeah.
With our finer sensory faculties and mentality more up, and our feet and the things that shuffle through the shit lower, and so on and so forth. So I mean, it's just fascinating the way this sort of structurality tends to settle itself out. But again, it's a mistake to draw any kind of conclusions from that, is to try and pin it down as being anything, because it's just another, display of the astounding integrated intelligence of all this patterning. I mean, all this patterning works with itself and with all of the aspects of itself so astoundingly, integratedly. Yes.
So when I was studying Kashmiri Shaivism, there's this chart that I learned where it starts with Satchidananda and then it goes down.
Tattvas and stuff.
Yeah, the tattvas. Right.
Right.
I forgot the word, but my senior moment didn't coincide with yours. But anyhow, and then there's the veil of Maya.
Right.
And I remember having a aha moment that it doesn't really matter what end you're looking at. It's just kind of endlessly recycling itself. That's kind of what you're talking about now.
Sure.
Right?
Well, if you look at the snake eating its tail as that verticality recycling itself,
Right.
you have that same image.
So, I mean, we have a verticality and we have this idea of Maya,
Right.
which is just an idea that isn't any more real than any other demarcation, right?
Well, Maya is very interesting. Maya is a very potent principle in a profound way, because I would say Maya indicates the way that the radiance seems to have a tendency to appear to be infinitely differentiated from itself. If you look at any portion of the experiential field, it is different and distinct from any other portion of the experiential field, and different than itself in the next moment. And when I say any portion, no matter how closely you look, you'll still find this uniqueness and absolute differentiation. So this is one thing, and yet it's infinitely differentiated from itself with absolute dynamism. I mean, how weird is that? No wonder it's confusing.
And so the Maya is that you can't connect those two.
The Maya is that it's not, the integrity of it, the wholeness of it is essentially invisible, whereas the differentiation of it is very explicit and obvious. And so this is a confusing aspect of it, which of course we're all familiar with being endlessly confused by, trying to make sense of this world and life forms and matter, and I mean, Jesus, all this incredible, range of stuff going on around here. But again, it's one thing.
Right.
It's Shiva. It's Shiva Shakti. I mean, Shiva Shakti in Kashmir Shaivism, Shiva is the winged sphere, and Shakti is the vertical wand with the serpent tied around it. The field, the infinite energy spectrum of the transcendental actuality of Shiva shows up as this amazing field of energy phenomena, apparent energy phenomena, that never depart from Shiva. They never become anything other than Shiva. They never were anything other than Shiva.
Shiva is the presence and Shakti is the radiance.
Yeah, you can say that if you want to be heavy-handed, but of course, you can't because you go looking for Shakti, you find Shiva, and you're looking for Shiva, you find Shakti. You go looking for radiance. It's very tempting with radiant presence to say, well, the presence is the unchanging presence of the moment in the observer, and the radiance is all of the dynamism of the unstable, incredible field of energy, of information overload, right? It's very easy to do that, but if you go looking for the one, you find the other.
Yeah.
Where you're going to look for the energy phenomena, wherever you look, you find the observer.
Yeah.
The observer isn't over here in the energy. When I see you, I don't see you there, I see you here. And the seeing is here, and your apparition is here, and, we think of it, we hold it as being two. So this is a part of the very essence of the psychic. I seem to recall defining the radiant presence as a psychic technology of reorienting to the actuality of your energy field. And this is the very nature of that. We have an intuitive feeling of, well, I'm here and you're there, right? And that intuitive feeling is wrong. I'm here and you're here. And that here-ness is palpable when you learn to see that it's actuality, And so this is the reorientation. It's not a conceptual reorientation. It's not philosophical. It's not like, oh, that sounds good. I mean, it would be nice if it was, because in a way that would be a lot simpler. It's a felt sense, or you could say a felt sense of participation, a felt sense of engagement.
And pretty blatant, really.
Well, it is. It is when you become an advanced yogi, relatively. But for a lot of people would say it's not blatant. A lot of people say, that sounds good. And how do you do that? You're over there. I'm over here. Yeah, okay. I get that. But that you don't have to see it that way, because it's not actually like that if you look very closely. And that's why looking closely is the essence of the yoga. Being with the way experience actually is, you discover the ways in which it's not what you're used to thinking it is. It is a way in which I'm used to thinking you're over there and I'm over here, and I can see it that way easily. Sure, no problem, right? You're there and I'm here, no problem, right? But if I look more closely at the actual phenomena of the presence of these, felt qualities in experience, one discovers this astounding, otherness to it that is not like that. It's not like that at all. And it's quite explicit and obvious, in fact, once you notice it.
You can play with it almost, like the face of the vase.
It's exactly like that. It's just like that. The optical illusion where it's two faces or a vase, or any optical illusion where it seems to be one thing and you look at it another way, it seems to be another. It's just like that, It's not faces or a vase. Those are just modes of seeing the same thing. And you can see this as infinitely spread out and separated from itself, and you can see it as a continuum of unity. And there's no difference. It's just different ways of seeing the same thing, which reveals the fundamental point that there's no way that this is. This is that which can be seen anyway. Is there any limit to the ways it can be seen? I don't know. I haven't found it. And spiritual ignorance is thinking that there is a certain way of seeing it which is true, and anything else than that is insanity. And realization is the discovery that any way of seeing it is as much it as any other way of seeing it, and it never collapses down to any particular way of being seen. It's absolute random access, absolute freedom, absolute any which way. So in a sense, realization is like total insanity, or believing everything. Can you believe? Can you see this as being controlled by aliens from Sirius? Sure, why not? Can you see it as quantum mechanism? Sure, why not? Can you see this as it's an inconceivable master plan of some transcendental intelligence that's purposefully orchestrating all sorts of, a very elaborate cause and effect to achieve some grand end. Sure, why not? But these are just takes on something that cannot be found to actually collapse to it, definitively being any of those ways. But it might be. I mean, you can see it that way, sure. Is it two faces? Sure. Is it a vase? Sure. Do you like the two faces better than the vase? Cool, hang out with the two faces.
Is it a particle, is it a wave? Sure.
Exactly. Same thing. How are y'all doing? Are people getting toasted? Any more questions? You want to look at anything else you want to knock off?
Well, that's just me.
I mean, I want to reiterate what we've been touching on all night, particularly in terms of the alchemical drawings. And there's one thing going on here that happens one way. It's a subtle, weird, nonlinear, irrational way, but still, there's one actuality here that is one thing that happens one way. And this is all about discovering that fact, which is so drastically contrary to normal human worldview. And so all of these different modes of playing with it, all these different modes of exploring aspects of it, you're just looking at one thing from various points of view. And this is the point, is to explore this one, explore this that you are, explore this that is here, this actuality, the field of your experience. However you want to call it, doesn't matter what you call it, because it's not verbal. But it's undeniably real, right? This is here, this is happening. That's the interesting thing. This is happening. What is this that's happening? And Yoga of Radiant Presence is simply looking at that fact. Yoga of Radiant Presence is kind of a pretentious title, in one sense, but in another sense it's very indicative, if you can tolerate a little pretentiousness. And as humans, you probably have used to putting up with a whole lot. So the next 4 days, I will be continually reiterating and urging you and inviting you to participate in looking at this one thing that is here, this actuality of the field of your experience, the presence of your being. And being with that, feeling it. There's no limit to how subtly and profoundly and intimately you can feel it. In fact, you already are. So it's just a matter of letting yourself tune into that, notice that, groove on that. And which is simple and fun. I mean, it's so much more fun than just, human normalcy. It's so dull. So being with this amazing range of subtlety and profundity that experience is just so delightful. I mean, it's basically, it's pure hedonism. It's pure joy. It's like, how good can this feel? How amazing can this feel? And just being with that amazingness to discover even more amazingness. And that turns out to be the the short path of yoga. How nice. For those of you that haven't been to one of these retreats, every morning from 9 to about 10:30, probably shorter than that at first, I do a sort of a non-meditation in here, which is basically just a direct experiential exploration of sitting and feeling your experience. So it's very simple, it's very loose and easy, and I will talk a little bit, but it's mostly non-verbal. It's just feeling experience, being with your experience like it's a symphony, and just feeling this astounding flow of complexity and textures and nuance that spontaneously occurs from moment to moment. And then after that, we have this little break, and then we'll take some time before lunch where we can sit and have some give and take or talk or whatever you feel like. And the afternoons are,
In the room, right?
no, here.
Oh, here, okay.
And then afternoons are off, so there's plenty of downtime. You can rest, or if you want to do some tourist things or whatever you enjoy. And I recommend if you want to really get the most out of this and immerse yourself in it, even at times when you're off, when it's not a particular event, try and just from time to time just feel the lusciousness of the texture of your experience, just in a nonlinear way. Anyway, it's not like you have to do anything in particular, but just let yourself feel this, rather than simply going to your normal mode. And there's nothing wrong with that. This is not an either or. Feeling the texture of your experience is obviously not the opposite of normalcy. It's just it's like the context of normalcy. Your normal modes and your habitual ways of thinking and being with your experience exist in the context of this amazing infinite textural field that's always present. And so this is just letting yourself feel a little bit of that, feel a little bit outside the box from time to time. And it's simple and fun. And so I recommend, for the duration of this retreat, try and let yourself do that with some deliberateness, even when there's not a particular event going on. And
Peter?
Yes.
One of the online people was asking if the schedule, the online schedule, what is the online schedule for?
Online schedule is evenings from 7 to 9
So
approximately.
that's all, just the evening?
Yeah, that's all we're going to be broadcasting.
Okay. All right.
It's all going to be recorded, so the audio files will be available eventually.
All of it will be recorded,
Yes.
including the meditation?
Yes.
Okay, because Rona wanted to know about the meditation. She'd like to listen to.
Yeah, I always record everything, and the audio files will be posted on the website.
All right,
But the
thank you.
video will only be in the evening.
All right, thank you.
And that'll also be archived if someone's not able to
On
see it
your
in real
website?
time. No, they're on YouTube.
Oh, on YouTube, I see what you're saying.
Well, I'd like to thank you all for coming. Yes?
I'd like to ask people to leave as soon as possible. If you want to talk or get together, maybe go to the dining room or outside, because later I have to close up and walk out.
Sure.
And there's a code that we have to punch.